When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes.
I was 17 years old. Like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. Already have a nigger mayor. We don't need any more nigger. Big party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind a little bit.
If Haiti just quietly sunk into the Caribbean or rose up 300 feet, it wouldn't matter a whole lot. Is it because blacks are involved in Haiti?
Comments he made about another White House hopeful, Senator Barack Obama.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in.
Have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black. They all know, but most people don't know. Unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things. Well, you know, I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun, and the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
I like the idea they keep in jail longer. I'm the guy that wrote the bill requiring federal judges to keep people in jail 100% of the time for which they're sentenced. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. Increase the penalties. Increase them. I would put the son of a gun in jail.
To remove judicial discretion for those who, quote, don't meet the middle-class criteria of susceptibility to rehabilitation.
They are beyond the pale, many of those people. They literally have not been socialized. They are in jail. Away from my mother, your husband, our families.
The Biden-Thurmond Violent Crime Control Act of 1991 would have increased the maximum sentence for 44 crimes to include the death penalty.
A wag in the newspaper recently wrote, Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking. I'm going to make it for 46 crimes. Biden says make it for 51. We're going to get...
He presented the final version of the legislation.
60 new death penalties, brand new, 60. There are 70 additional enhancements of penalties, i.e., you go to jail longer.
After his disastrous 1987 presidential campaign, Biden had staged his political comeback, in part by becoming a media darling on issues of policing and crime, and he led the fight to pass the landmark 1994 crime bill under Bill Clinton.
When I wrote the original bill that started this whole process, the so-called Biden crime bill, I didn't call a liberal confab and write it. I didn't call any big society people and write it. I called the cops.
A Democratic president wants 100,000 cops. A Democratic president wants to build 125,000 new prison cells.
That's the secret. That somehow the Republicans tried to make the crime bill tougher. I say, didn't make anything tougher. Found out that this midnight basketball isn't getting them together, a bunch of jive folks living in their city to do, try to see if they can be Michael Jordan. When they found out that we're keeping schools open so gangs come off streets instead of out raping my mother, marauding me, robbing the local store, they're in a gymnasium. And my daughter will be safer, my wife will be safer, my mother will be safer, and I will be safer. And I will be happy.
Never again should Washington put politics and party above law and order.
Along with several laws passed in the 80s, the 1994 crime bill drove up the local, state, and federal prison populations, and it tarnished the reputations of Biden and Bill Clinton, who signed it into law.
Hey, Clinton! You didn't want to take pictures of my people here! We're still in jail for what you did!
When Biden ran for president in 2008, he told the New York Times that he knew more people would be locked up across the board.
You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill. We had enormous.
Talk about something else that has bubbled up. The Daily Mail says that it has gotten these texts that it says are back and forth between Hunter Biden and his attorney using the N-word. Donald Trump Jr. tweets this: try to imagine one of the Trump kids dropping the N-word, real quote from Hunter, and then he uses one of the quotes from the text with the hashtag racist Hunter, Jason, which is trending tonight.
But even though the N-word is absolutely disgusting, in my opinion, I don't care who is saying it to who, and I've had some people that I know that said to me it's okay in certain situations. I'm not okay with that. But Hunter Biden is not president, and even though he's the president's son, he is not running for office. He is not an elected official.
I think, Leslie, though, you speak honestly. If this was Don Jr. or Eric Trump, honestly, do you think that the mainstream media, Democrats would be all over it, and Republicans would be under pressure to come out and say that's disgusting and not okay?
Yeah, sort of like when Marjorie Taylor Greene kept making her Holocaust references, and it took days and even for some weeks, and even some are still silent on the right. Not wait.
Texas, our First Lady Jill Biden was there. She was speaking to the Latinx inclusion group, and she talked about how unique they were, and she compared them to breakfast tacos, which was an insulting comment according to many of the Hispanics that live in that area. Listen.
Raul helped build this organization with the understanding that the diversity of this community, as distinct as the Bogotas of the Bronx, as beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio, is your strength.
Right, fantastic. So that there's a speechwriter now looking for work today.
Right.